Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Hana's second quarter review. Sorry, some technical problem. Let's click this video. Okay, so second quarter operating profits came in with 494 million, which was down 37% on the year, but up 34% on the quarter. Year on year, our top line sales revenue was down 2%. Our operating profit was down 37%. The second quarter last year was very high. Operating margins reduced 4% from 11 to 7. EBITDA, 933 million, down 23%. And net profit after tax, 376 million, down 41%. Net cash and short-term investments increased 193%, mostly due to the private placement done in October last year, but also an improvement in a reduction in raw materials conversion back to cash. On a quarter-on-quarter basis, sales were up 6%. Operating profits up 35% to 494 million. Operating profits up 1% to 7, and the rest was the same. So I'll go through each of the main operations briefly. Hana Microelectronics saw a flat quarter-on-quarter sale of 3.2 billion, but up 3% on the year. It was a very good quarter for Lampoon. We recorded a record operating profit for the second quarter, and overall demand remained quite strong for automotive, industrial, and test and measurement. Commercial was a bit weak quarter-on-quarter, and our medical flat. Industrial was also flat quarter-on-quarter. We saw continued strong focus on productivity and automation, which helped with a weak Thai baht create a record operating profit. The outlook for the third quarter is expected to be flat quarter-on-quarter, with the similar segments performing well, similar to the second quarter. Moving on to China in our EMS business. So we saw revenues up 50% on the quarter to 1.17 billion baht and up 12% on the year. We continue to see strong demand from smart power grid modules, which we have a contract to support the Italian equivalent, Italian state oil company. And this is a big business for us and is helping Hana Microelectronics perform well. Our access control and RFID business also grew, but there was a 9.2% minimum wage increase, which impacted our operating profits. Despite the fact that the RMB remained weak, this, of course, RMB did not weaken by 9.2%, but good productivity focus helped improve the bottom line. Overall, for the outlook of the third quarter, we think it's going to be flat, but finally, we have received qualification on our inlay business from Auburn, and this is expected to help us improve in the second half of this year. We are anticipating to see growth in the PC market. This is an industry which has been quite weak for quite some time, but because of AI, a lot of consumers are now looking to upgrade their PCs or tablets to have AI-enabled functions, and the PC business is expected to grow this year for the first time for quite a while. Moving on to Ayutthaya. The situation still remains difficult, but in the second quarter, our sales were flat at 1.6 billion, but down significantly 19% for the year. Our average loadings improved from a very low level of below 51%, below 50% to just over 50%, up by 4%. That was a combination of seeing our standard IC growing by 11%, but the optoelectronics dropping by 15%. Again, strong control over utilities and productivity developments helped to enable us to improve our overall operating profit over Q1. Q3 continues to see loading improvements for standard IC, and we are in fact projecting a 9% increase in our loadings to 60%. However, we still see weakness in our opto business, so unfortunately that will have some impact as a result of that going down. And we also signed to purchase an additional piece of land, 13 Rai, which includes a building, 13,300 square meters, which is next to our existing future location that you see here in the picture. So this was purchased or will be purchased soon from Canon, and we bought it at a very good price. In fact, it's if you consider the land without any building, we paid about 9 million baht more than the market price just for the land. So we got the building for about 8 or 9 million baht. And if you build a 13,000 square meter building, it would cost you over 200 million baht. So this is a good deal for future expansion. Moving on to our operation in Jiaxing. Sales were up 35% of the quarter, but still very weak year on year, down 42%. Our China OSAT business still remains very weak. China economy is very, very difficult at the moment. I think everybody knows that. Despite that, we have won some new business for a major Chinese mobile company. So that is expected to support in the second half. And our EV module business, which had actually stopped for the past nine months, is starting to come back. And we're going to see some orders improving towards the end of the third quarter and increasing in the fourth quarter this year. We have invested very heavily in power module devices, power module discretes, back-end assembly, and there's strong interest from a number of international customers. And we think this is going to support the facility moving forward in 2025. And some of these packages are patented, and so we feel that this is a great opportunity to bring up the IC business in China, which has been weak for quite some time. Overall, however, for the rest of the year, we still see the situation remaining relatively soft. So just a slide on overall semiconductor sales increased quite nicely in the second quarter, but of course most of that was driven by AI, microprocessors and memory, which is related to AI. Smartphones, which, as you know, is quite a big part of our business, is looking very positive. Finally, this is an industry which has been very weak after COVID, but projected this year of a growth of around 12%. And this is one area, a bright spot that we see going forward for our OSAT business. You can see here a chart, the average loadings. So going back to Q2 of 23 at the peak there, and it's come down. And then in Q1, it hits the bottom. And I think it's starting to come up again in Q2. And we expect that to increase slightly, but it's not going to be V-shaped. It's more U-shaped, in our opinion, going forward. Moving on to the USA, in Ohio, they're doing very well. Revenues were up 22% on the quarter and 48% on the year. This was driven by strong growth from our inlay business and power tags as well, plus microelectronics. We're going to finally exit our old factory by the end of this month, and that will reduce the cost of running two operations. And finally, we have received the long-awaited certification or recertification in the case of Ohio on our inlay activity, and this is going to further increase demand for this business going forward. So we are projecting continued growth in the second half of this year, driven by inlays and tire tags. And in order to cope with the increased demand, we've taken delivery of one more automated line, which will come in the fourth quarter in Ohio. Cambodia remains difficult for us, unfortunately, although they were 18% up on the quarter, but still down 44% on the year. And the main reason was, in the past year, we enjoyed good growth because of the remote control business, which related to the pandemic demand, people sitting at home watching TV, that sort of thing. But then, of course, after COVID ended, everyone stopped doing that and go back to their life. And so that business dropped off and, in fact, actually stopped. So that was a big drop for us. Nevertheless, we have been working on our productivity, and we will be transferring work from our China operation. A number of customers are getting nervous about the results of the US election. So this China plus one issue is starting to become talked about again. And a number of customers want to move production or expand out of China into either Thailand and Cambodia. Ultimately, we believe Hana Cambodia will play a very important role for products that need TAA certification. And we have a big meeting with one of our largest customers for some significant expansion, which we think is going to come in the middle of next year in Cambodia to support the TAA opportunities. And this could change Cambodia. And I feel positive that by the end of next year, we'll be in a much better situation. So here's a chart on the end applications. You can see telecom dropped slightly. Autos were up. Industrials up a bit. RF slightly down. Opto down. Consumer flat. Computer flat. And medical down. The Thai baht continues to strengthen as a result of the US anticipated rate cuts, but we believe as soon as the Fed cuts rates, the Bank of Thailand finally will follow suit. So nobody can predict how the situation will be, but definitely the strong Thai baht will have an impact on our margins because there's a big difference between 34 and 37 moving forward. Moving on to Korea PMS, we saw an 89% increase in our sales quarter on quarter and 32% year on year. We have made substantial improvements in our manufacturing operations, but whilst our silicon business still remains challenging, we have improved output, and that will help to reduce our cash burn. Our new silicon carbide equipment has come in, but unfortunately, the pricing of silicon carbide has dropped significantly. And the reason is because, as you may know, that whilst EV cars are growing very steadily, especially in China, the rate of growth has dropped both in Europe and the United States. And many of the big silicon carbide producers who had built capacities to support the American and European car companies are unable to sell their silicon carbide. So they're starting to try to sell in the China market, which is the market that the PMS is focusing on. And that's creating now price pressure. However, the cost of the raw materials has also dropped substantially. So this change is quite sudden. And the challenge now is how to manage the dynamics of this fast-moving situation. The outlook in the third quarter, we expect growth, but it's not as high as previously projected due to this price pressure situation I just mentioned. We plan to sign an exclusive marketing agreement with a large Chinese auto group to focus on the Chinese EV onboard electronics, whilst PMS marketing will focus on other activities such as PV, data centers, UPS, and EV charging. Because in China, you really have to have a relationship. So we think this is a good move, and I hope to be able to give you more details once everything's been cleared with our partner in the next month or so. So despite what I was saying in terms of a slowdown in EV sales in the US and Europe, they still continue and are hitting records. The problem is that the American and European car industry cannot produce a car and sell it at a price and make a profit, unlike China, or of course the one big guy, Tesla. So it is one of the reasons why the US and Europe have put up tariffs from China, because they need to support their domestic market and give them time in order to reposition themselves, because it is politically unacceptable for the industry to come under pressure from Chinese imports. So in general, the silicon carbide demand will shift as EV growth rates slow, but they will increase. And as you can see from this chart, the big player is still China. I mean, for example, China is the world's largest car consumer of any type in the world. So China still is the most important market. But the rate of growth of silicon carbide is not going to be as fast as was originally anticipated because of the slowdown in the US and in Europe. Now, I'd like to talk in more detail about the recent developments of the joint venture between PTT Group and the Hana MICROELECTRONICS to create a company called FT1 Corporation. And this will be Thailand's first commercial size wafer fab. Okay, so a partnership between PTT and Hana. PTT is the majority, 51%, and Hana 49%. And before I answer any questions, I need to state that the information I will give you now has been cleared by PTT, and I will do my best to answer any questions you may have, but I will be limited to the amount of information I can share with you without having permission from FTT, because they are the senior partner in this joint venture. So what is FT1's business model? FT1 is a semiconductor foundry for silicon carbide. A foundry is a company that produces chips for other companies. It doesn't have its own design. Okay? It's like a subcontractor for chips, okay? A bit like TSMC. Where will it be located? Our plan is to put it in Lamphun, next to Hana's second facility in the Sahara region. And the reason why we're doing it there is, apart from being close to our operation to help support all the issues, it was the best location for water, because the silicon carbide factory consumes a lot of water. Thailand has never built a semiconductor factory, and do we have the required human resources? Well, the short answer is today we don't, but we do plan to have them by the time this company goes into operation. And what we will do is we will train all the necessary staff at Hana's subsidiary PMS in Korea for about 2 years before returning to Thailand to run the Thai operation. How much is anticipated the investment from Hana into FT1? We will invest about 745 million by the end of this month. And that'll be the first investment. There will be additional investments, and as and when they come, I will let you know. But beyond that, I'm not at liberty to inform you further than that. Of course, this is for our half, right? PTT will do the same, 51%. How will Hana finance this project? So we will use partly the funds that we raised last October in the private placement, and of course, we will use cash generated from our normal EBITDA. And if we need it, we can raise additional debt. And I would just like to explain that. So Hana's current cash position is approximately 9 billion baht. That is net cash. Okay, we have debt, so the net cash is 9 billion. And currently, our EBITDA to interest coverage, so the amount of cash that we generate in relation to the interest that we need to pay, is greater than 30 times. Typically, a bank would be satisfied with an interest cover of 5 or 6 times. So we're very comfortable. So what I'm trying to say is, I do not see a problem if we need to raise capital, need to raise more debt and not raise capital in the future to fund our participation in FT1. Now, how will Hana account for FT1? Because we are 49% minority shareholder, there will be one line on what we call an accounting, equity accounting basis. So in our quarterly accounts, you'll just see one line, and it'll be the profit or loss on our share in the joint venture. We will not consolidate the revenues. What is the overall investment plan for FT1? Well, I've given you the initial one, and it will be more than that, but we are not at liberty to say what the overall plan is because it's not yet finalized. Is there any support from the Thai government? Yes, there has been. We have received very good support from the BOI in terms of tax holidays, and we have got financial support to purchase equipment. The amount is confidential, but we regard it as a significant support from the Thai government, for which we're very grateful. How long before the factory can start operation? The plan is to start operation by middle of 2027. So currently the facility is under design, and we hope to break ground and start piling by the end of this year. And we think it will take approximately 2 years to complete the building, and then another 6 months to do qualification. So around mid-27. Who will be FT1's target customers? Of course, PMS is going to be the first customer, and PMS has been contracted to provide the necessary technical transfer to FT1. Okay, so not only will PMS teach FT1 how to produce the silicon carbide, they will also provide demand, the initial demand to FT1 for the work that PMS has itself. Okay, but after that, we target any number of power management design houses, of which there are many in the world, who have interest in the silicon carbide foundry. How long before the business can break even? And this will, of course, depend on the overall demand at the time, but obviously this is a capital-heavy investment, so it will not be immediate. I can't really give an exact date because it all depends on the demand. And finally, why undertake this venture? We believe that Thailand needs to move up the value curve in terms of technology. If we don't do this now, sooner or later, we will be left behind by other countries. Our back-end assembly, our current core business, our EMS business is fine, it's doing okay, but many other countries do this. And soon you're going to get countries like India, who are actually subsidizing their companies far more than even China are doing. So one of the big issues for many manufacturers in Southeast Asia has been how China subsidizes their companies. Well, India is going to become China version 2. They are subsidizing their companies even more than China is doing it. And this is going to be a competitive threat. We think it's important that we move up the value chain in order to do something different, to stay ahead. It will take time, it will take investment, but we think this is the right direction to take our company and to help the country move forward in terms of technology. Also, silicon carbide devices are used in many applications. Of course, EV cars is one of them. And Thailand's been very successful in attracting many Chinese EV companies. And they need to use a local supply chain. And the Board of Investment are providing incentives for these locally based EV companies to use the domestic supply chain up to 40%. So again, this is a great opportunity for FT1 over the next 3 to 5 years. Further, we think that in a very fast changing geopolitical situation, Thailand's neutral position can be very beneficial in providing what we call like an economic bridge between China and the West. Of course, a lot will depend on who wins the US elections and how the US and China will reposition themselves as a result of the election, because we don't know who's going to win. But we believe that a neutral position such as Thailand has a big opportunity either way, depending on whether it's a Democrat or Republican government. And finally, we project that by 2027, we sincerely hope that PMS in Korea will have reached its capacity, and therefore we need to expand beyond that. And we will not expand because the factory is physically full in Korea, and therefore the expansion will continue in FT1. So PMS and FT1 will be working very closely in growing the silicon carbide business. So finally, just for the capex liquidity numbers, so the EBITDA was 933 million, down 280 million. Capex was slightly less, from 930 to 642, and net cash, as I mentioned, increased by 6.2 billion. So in summary, the Q2 demand remained flat for OSAT, but utilization was still below 50%, but we still were able to generate a profit because of strong productivity. EMS and PMS business continues to do very well, without being recorded in operating profit in the second quarter. USA is doing very well, and growth in RFID business is looking very strong and will continue in the second half of this year. PMS starts to ramp up its silicon carbide, and silicon demand saw recovery, but with these price challenge situation, this will be very difficult for us, at least for the next 6 to 9 months. And of course, a weaker Thai baht helped our margins on a year-on-year basis in the second quarter. And looking ahead to the third quarter, we see EMS outlook remaining flat, but firm compared to the second quarter. RFID looking very positive. Cambodia will still remain challenging, but the losses are quite minimal. OSAT demand continues to improve. We see stronger demand, particularly for mobile phone activity, but unfortunately our optoelectronics business is a little bit weak. But we will see loadings going above 50% and maybe hitting 60% in the second half of this year. We project PMS to continue to grow, but with the price pressure and the challenges, it will still remain a loss-making operation for a while, I have to admit. And the fear of a Trump win has reignited demand for China Plus One, so we are seeing a lot more activity for companies looking to de-risk their exposure to China and looking for Thailand and Cambodia to help them support that de-risking initiative. And finally, we received $8.5 million from UBS, who decided to pay back 90% of the NAV from the supply chain fund. You may remember that in February 2021, we wrote down 12.5 million. Of course, we got some money, bits and pieces after that, but finally, UBS decided to, because everyone was suing them, to offer the NAV at 90%. So Hana has received 8.5 million, which will come in the third quarter. Okay, so that ends the presentation. Now we'll look for your questions. So the direction of the business, well, I think I made that clear in the number of statements I've had. We're going to focus on our core business, and we're going to expand now to improve the OSAT business. Obviously, the FT1 is in the early stages, so that's really more the next few year business. But I think the direction of the business will remain relatively positive compared to the first half, but you must understand with a much stronger Thai baht, that will be a challenge for the company. So what is the investment strategy? Well, again, as I told you, we're investing. We keep our investment plans in PMS were put in place a long time ago because the machine lead time was 2 years, and that's coming in now. So over the course of the rest of this year, most of the equipment will come in. We are not spending too much money at the moment until we see a better improvement in our OSAT business. So most of our capital expenditure will be in Korea, but we are going to buy that piece of land. The opportunity came up in high tech in the UTO. So I've disclosed about the Credit Suisse payback. It's $8.5 million, and we will report that in Q3. So the question is, what is the break-even point considering automation? Well, it really depends on the cost of the automation. But I would say that we consider anything within 3 years to be a viable investment timeframe. And of course, when you do make an investment in automation, you don't know how the increase in labor will be in 3 years' time, but you know it's not going to go down. So I would say the break-even would be anywhere within 3 years. It's the time. Okay.
Still hope that PMS still be an impact of the company or not, because it seems to be too late, and the war of the EV is strong and also declining in China. So PMS still be a new S-curve of the company.
So the EV war will continue, as you have pointed out, but with the drop in the price of silicon carbide, one of the big opportunities is the total available market we call TAM, T-A-M. The total available market will expand. As the price of silicon carbide goes down, more industries will use it, like UPS, EV, AI, power management, HVAC. So it is not only EV that needs silicon carbide.
คือจะบอกว่าสำหรับ PMS แล้วเนี่ยซิลิคอนคาร์ไบด์เนี่ยสามารถใช้ได้ในหลายผลิตภัณฑ์เลยนะไม่ได้ว่าจะใช้ได้แต่ในเฉพาะตัว EV เท่านั้นแล้วก็รวมถึงการใช้ได้ในหลายโปรดักต์ไม่ว่าจะเป็นตัวของ AI ที่ก็ต้องใช้ตัวนี้ด้วยนะคะแล้วก็ตลาดเนี่ยก็ยังมีกว้างอยู่มากถึงแม้ว่าจะมีสงครามของเรื่องของธุรกิจของรถ EV มากก็ยังถือว่ายังเป็นมีโอกาสของ PMS ค่ะเพราะว่ายังใช้ได้ในหลายโปรดักต์แล้วก็เรื่องของการใช้ตัวนี้ก็ยังมีอยู่อีกมากเลยค่ะ
The challenge for silicon carbide producers like PMS is how to design the next generation device, which is smaller and more powerful and cheaper.
สำหรับอนาคตของเจ้าตัวที่เป็นซิลิคอนคาร์บายเนี่ยหลักการของเราก็คือทำให้มีขนาดเล็กลงแล้วก็ให้พลังงานมากขึ้นแล้วก็ราคาที่ถูกเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยมันก็ยังมีจุดที่สามารถพัฒนาไปได้อีกมากค่ะ
And our R&D team have a very clear roadmap how to continue to shrink the die size to achieve this lower cost and higher performance.
แล้วก็สำหรับทีมของเราที่ BMS นะคะเรามีจุดมุ่งหมายที่แน่นอนแล้วเราก็มีจุดมุ่งหมายที่เด่นชัดว่าเราจะต้องทำให้มันได้คุณภาพแล้วก็เราจะต้องลดขนาดของเจ้าตัวได้ให้มากที่สุดค่ะ
So in summary, we have every confidence that the product silicon carbide will continue to see strong demand. The challenge is how to manage this cost reduction very quickly. This is the big challenge.
คือเราก็ยังมั่นใจว่าเรายังสามารถอยู่ตรงนี้ได้เพราะว่าในเรื่องของตัวนี้เนี่ยเราคือยังมีความต้องการอยู่อีกมากยังมีผสมอยู่อีกมากเพราะฉะนั้นในตัวนี้เนี่ยเราสามารถทำได้ถ้าเราสามารถปรับเรื่องของราคาแล้วก็ต้นทุนด้วยค่ะ You please update in the last update you said that you start the charger station business and start yet.
So previously when we discussed about the charging station, I just want to make sure I clarify. We're trying to build the power module that goes into the charging station. Okay, so we are designing this in Korea in collaboration with a Korean company, and we're making progress. But the demand for this is for Korea, not for anywhere else. So that is ongoing.
สำหรับตัวนี้แล้วเนี่ยคือจริงๆต้องอธิบายก่อนว่าตัวนี้เนี่ยหมายถึงว่าเราทำเจ้าตัว power module ซึ่งเป็นตัวของพลังงานเนี่ยที่ charger station นะคะไม่ได้หมายถึงเราทำตัว charger station แต่ว่าเราทำตัว power module ในนั้นโดยอาศัยความร่วมมือกับบริษัทที่เกาหลีนะคะแล้วก็มันก็ยังทำอยู่นะ
I did mention that when they launched their product for Korea, I tried to negotiate whether we can take that product and bring it to Thailand, but they have not got to that point yet.
คือจริงๆแล้วเราก็เคยได้คุยกับเขาว่าเราสามารถที่จะเอาตัวนั้นเข้ามาที่เมืองไทยได้ไหมแต่ว่าคือจริงๆตอนนี้เราก็ยังไม่มีข้อสรุปเรื่องตัวนี้นะคะก็คือยังใช้กับทางที่เกาหลีอยู่นะคะ Please update PMS the production about the productivity the percent of
Productivity PLS. In terms of manufacturing productivity, I think we are quite okay. Of course, there's always opportunity for improvement, but I think our processes are in line with most of the other major companies.
ก็คือตอนนี้ก็คือยังดีอยู่นะคะแล้วก็ยังไปในทิศทางที่เราวางไว้ค่ะ In the future, PMS can produce and sell their full capacity when we have the full capacity.
Well, I mean, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, by the time FT1 is ready for production, which is mid-27, we would like to have filled our capacity because after you fill, you have to expand, but then we expand in FT1. So mid-2027 would be the target.
เป้าหมายอยู่ที่ปี 2027 นะคะอย่างที่คุณริชาร์ดได้พรีเซนต์ไปเรื่องของตัวที่เป็น FT1 นะคะก็คือเรามองไว้แล้วว่าถ้าเกิดว่าเราเป็นตรงช่วงประมาณปีนั้นก็จะได้มีส่วนของ FT1 เข้ามาร่วมด้วยค่ะ For the China world war with US and China, as Hana have the plan in China and US, so any effect to the cost and also we have the we will produce which product in which plant how we make decision.
Yeah, okay. So generally speaking, what we are doing is we produce products in China for the China market, and we produce products in Thailand or Cambodia for outside China.
คือเราทำการผลิตสินค้าของจีนสำหรับที่จีนและเราก็ผลิตสินค้าที่เมืองไทยแล้วก็ที่กัมพูชาสำหรับที่อยู่นอกเขตของจีนนะคะ
Yeah, and of course there are many products which the same product needs to be used in China and outside China.
แล้วก็อาจจะมีบางผลิตภัณฑ์ที่ใช้ได้ทั้งในจีนแล้วก็นอกจีนค่ะ
So as I mentioned, for parts that go into the EV car, if you want to support a Chinese EV car supply chain, those companies want you to make it in China. But if you want to support a non-China EV supply chain, they want it to be done outside China. But the part is the same. So in many cases, I believe we will have to have the same lines both in China and outside China.
โอเคก็คือจริงๆแล้วเนี่ยอย่างที่ทราบก็คือถ้าสมมติว่าเราจะผลิตเจ้าตัว EV สำหรับโรงงานผลิต EV ที่เมืองจีนแล้วเนี่ยเขาก็ต้องการตัวที่มาใช้เนี่ยจากเมืองจีนในขณะที่อันที่อยู่นอกเมืองจีนเนี่ยก็ต้องการผลิตภัณฑ์จากที่นอกเมืองจีนเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยทั้งหมดเนี่ยจริงๆคือผลิตภัณฑ์เดียวกันในที่สุดแล้วก็คือเราก็จะทำผลิตภัณฑ์เดียวกันอยู่ทั้งในจีนและก็นอกประเทศจีนด้วยค่ะ
So the next question is why did China increase 12% regardless of geopolitical issues? Well, geopolitical issues changing all the time. Okay, the product that we were doing that drove the PCBA in China, as I mentioned earlier, was this product for the Italian state oil company, and they, the taxes, Italy and China actually have quite a good relationship, so they don't mind that part being built in China. Okay, it's not when we talk about it really depends on the product and the country, and even Europe, which is supposed to be like speaking as one body. Germany is very pro-China, but France is very anti-China, and Italy is very pro-China. So it's not quite so black and white.
About PDT, update to PDT.
Well, I'll give you that update.
คือข้อนี้ก็แจ้งไปแล้วนะคะใน presentation นะคะ
So the reason why we bought this land, despite probably not needing it today, is because it's an opportunity to get a piece of land which is right next to the current piece of land that we own. Because in our business, if you expand on another location, even if it's on the other side of the road, you have to requalify everything, and customers don't want to do that. But if you can expand on a factory there's no fence, no barrier between, then there's no requalification. So this was an opportunity we had to take. Today it's weak, but semiconductor is very cyclical. In the next 2-3 years, the situation could be very different. So I think I covered this point about geopolitical issues and trade wars. We are trying to kind of play both sides, if you will. You know, we build products in China for China. We build products in Thailand and Korea for outside. We build products in China for people, for Europe, who are not bothered about China. And it really depends on the product and the customer. So regarding to the cyclicality and the U-shaped recovery, as I showed from that loading chart, I think that Q1 is probably the bottom of the current cycle, and I would expect it to start moving up, but I wouldn't call it a V-shape. I would call it more elongated U-shape, and I think it's driven more by restocking than demand. A lot will depend on how the consumer is impacted by high interest rates, and obviously we wait to see what the Federal Reserve will do on the 18th of September. I think 25 basis points is for sure. Question about our competitiveness in relation to the Vietnamese market. Vietnam is a very competitive operation. They have low labor costs and a very strong workforce. I think we can compete with Vietnam, but their proximity to China is an advantage, okay? And their lower labor cost is an advantage. But I think our automation and technology is probably a little bit better, certainly on the semiconductor side.
development of silicon carbide and with FT1.
So I think I've answered that. FT1 is a foundry basis, okay? So with FT1's attempt moving up the value chain, the value creation activities, it's the in-house design is PMS, not FT1. The value for FT1 is how to manage and operate a wafer fab, which frankly is not easy already. So I think that is really the challenge and the opportunity for Thailand. Stop. Okay, we continue.
Half year, second half, compared with the first half.
Well, I think the second half in terms of demand, we should see some improvement, but given that we are seeing a substantial strength in the Thai baht, financially, it might still remain challenging as a result of that. So regarding geopolitical issues, whilst there seems to be a lot more interest because of the worry about the results of the US elections on November the 5th, I think that most of our customers are talking to companies like Hana and seeing how we can help them, but they're not really going to do anything until they know what the result is. So everyone is preparing and then watching to see what the result, because nobody really knows what's going to happen. And even if Mr. Trump wins and he is telling everyone he's going to tax China 60% and all this sort of stuff, it may not be possible, because even if he wins, he may not win both the House and the Senate, and you need to control both in order to drive through legislation. So I think it's a wait and see at the moment, but a lot of work is being done to prepare in case things start getting nasty. So new applications, the investment is there's no investment. It's human capital. It's a design team. Okay, the real key strength of PowerMaster is its technical capability. So the investment is in human capital. Okay, I think that's it. I think we've run over time. Any last questions? I'd be happy to answer them. But if not, thank you all very much for your time. Thank you very much, Brad.